This is the story of Yoichi Karasuma, a 17-year-old samurai whose entire living experience has mostly been about training in the mountains while learning swordsmanship from his father. But now that 17 years has passed, he has mastered the divine wind-styled swordplay. His father is satisfied. He tells his son that there's nothing more he can teach him. To put it simply, he can't get any stronger than this. Yoichi had already reached the pinnacle of the divine wind style. Hearing this, Yoichi is frustrated. He wants to become even stronger, so he asks his father for guidance, even though he had already surpassed him. That's when he's told to go and explore the world. He knows nothing of what exists beyond the mountains. By experiencing the world, his heart will become stronger. Just like that, Yoichi leaves the mountains. Meanwhile, at a house in the city where four sisters are living together, the doorbell suddenly rings. Yoichi's father has sent a message through an arrow. The oldest sister, Ibuki, checks the letter, and suddenly there is a family meeting, where she explains to the other sisters that someone will be living together with them from today onwards. 16-year-old Ayame is not so laid back that she'd allow a total stranger to live with them, though the 15-year-old Chihaya says she doesn't really care. In fact, it'd be safer for them to have a guy around. Hearing this, Ayame was just going to leave her food lying on the table and go back to sleep, but after realizing that their 10-year-old sister Kagome helped make the food, she finishes her plate. As for Yoichi, he's currently wandering through the city, taken aback by pretty much everything he sees. Well, that's to be expected considering the life he had lived until now. Though, because of his traditional samurai attire, he's also the center of attention. It's almost 2 p.m. and he's about to head over to the place where he was going to meet his new housemates, when he runs into a high school delinquent and former boxer named Ryo. He starts making fun of Yoichi's traditional samurai clothes, but instantly gets put in his place. His clothes also got him in some trouble with the police, but it wasn't that serious. He looks at the clock and realizes that he has to get to the meeting spot, and so he excuses himself from the police and runs off to the shopping mall. He makes it there in time, but doesn't know exactly where he's supposed to meet them. The sisters, on the other hand, had been waiting outside the shopping mall all this time. Little do they know that the man they're waiting for is already inside and running. After getting tired of waiting, Ayame decides to go inside and check out some clothes, while Chihaya goes to have a peek at the bookstore. This leaves only Ibuki and Kagome behind, but Kagome also leaves to go to the bathroom. Then we come back to Yoichi, who's about as confused as I was during high school calculus. But hey, looks like he's having a good time trying out the escalator. Koichi couldn't stop the momentum of the escalator and got thrown off into a trolley. He couldn't stop the trolley either and ultimately ended up in the changing room, where a young girl was about to change. As you can expect, it was Ayame, but the two of them didn't know who the other was. She lets out all sorts of weird insults, which even gets the attention of the security, but Yoichi catches a glimpse of a thief running away with somebody's purse and decides to excuse himself. He chases after the thief but gets stopped because the culprit had already entered the elevator. Still though, Yoichi was smart enough to realize that he'd need to use the escalator to get to the thief. He catches his sight again and chases him right into a bookstore where he stumbles onto a girl. Yoichi takes a moment to regain his composure and then runs off after the thief once again. This time he successfully catches and then leaves the thief for the police to take care of. Meanwhile, Ibuki is still outside waiting for Yoichi to show up. Yoichi is also getting tired of trying to find them. He wonders if it was really better for him to stay away from the city, but that's when he hears the cries of a young girl. It's Kagome, who's gotten lost. He cheers her up by small talk and then helps her find her older sister. Soon enough, she pinpoints Ibuki, who was also inside the mall by this point. Yoichi dramatically uses one of the ropes to fly all the way to the other side of the mall. He drops Kagome in Ibuki's arms, their eyes meet for an instant, but since he himself couldn't bear the impact of his technique and the swirling around, he's thrown away right into a steam train. It is indeed a long and hard day for Yoichi and the sisters. A few hours later, the train finally returns. He starts sulking on a bridge, wondering if they're still waiting for him. Fortunately, Ibuki had already realized that he was him, judging from the technique he had shown inside the mall. She meets him at the bridge and introduces herself, while also thanking Yoichi for helping out Kagome earlier. Anyway, the police also finally catch him after all the trouble he caused them all day. He goes around apologizing to the store owners in the mall and also accepts gratitude from the old lady whose purse was stolen. Just like that, Ibuki takes him to the house, but of course Ayame and Chihaya had also already had their embarrassing encounters with Yoichi. Even so, Yoichi's city life had only just begun. The following day, Ibuki discovers Yoichi's poetry about her wonderful opai and kicks him straight into Ayame's room. A chaotic start for Yoichi's first morning in the city. Now, Yoichi also has to attend the school together with them, so he goes there together with Ibuki and Ayame, who are also high school students. As it turns out, Yoichi is in the same class as not only Ibuki, but also that delinquent who he beat back there. Everyone is interested in Yoichi, especially the female students, who keep pestering and questioning him. Seeing this, Ibuki takes him out of the class and beats him once again. guess who's jealous? That delinquent Ryo challenges Yoichi once again, this time with the entire school watching. But, of course, he's no match for Yoichi. It's a busy day, which causes Yoichi to catch a fever. Though when they're on their way back, both Yoichi and Ibuki apologize to each other and make up. Now, if the city life and the hormones weren't enough, another trouble enters Yoichi's fray. An awkward girl named Tsubame transfers into their class. Yoichi thinks she's quite cute, but gets his ass handed to him by Ibuki. So what's the deal with this girl? Why is she transferred to their class? Well, as it turns out, Tsubame also lived and trained in the mountains together with her subordinate named Angela, and now she's been hired by a certain Sakinomiya to kill Yoichi. To quote Yoichi's words, Angela has a tall and dynamic body. Later that day, her subordinate casually strips her naked right in front of Yoichi and Ibuki and readies her to face off against Yoichi. In the burst of the moment, Tsubame attacks him, but that delinquent pops up all of a sudden, hands his jacket to Tsubame so that she can cover her body. What do you know, the guy can do some decent stuff once in a while. But Tsubame was too embarrassed by everything. She runs away crying and later tells Angela how much she hates her and the martial arts. It's not fair. All she wants is to live a normal life like a normal girl. So they both apologize to each other, leave this stupid martial arts business behind, and start working at a restaurant. It's a pretty happy ending. Following these events, Chihaya is seen working on her manga. She appears to be in turmoil though. While Ibuki and Yoichi are sword fighting in the dojo, right in front of Ibuki's 4 students and Ayame, Yoichi goes overboard with his technique and ends up ripping off Ibuki's clothes. Seriously, you can't have a normal moment with Yoichi's around. And so, you guessed it, Ibuki kicks his ass. He accidentally makes Kagome cry by destroying her arts project. And so, say it with me, Ibuki kicks his ass yet again. Poor Yoichi always having the short end of the stick. Anyway, he's then asked to go take Chihaya's notebook to her, who is at cram school. But on the way, he comes across and overhears 3 guys. They were talking about Chihaya and how they ruined her manga. This riles him up. He rushes to the classroom only to find her in a not-so-pleasant state, with her manga all torn apart. That was it. Yoichi goes and destroys those guys. Following this event, something interesting happens. Yoichi receives a love letter and an invitation from a girl named Yui Hinagata. Though, just between you and me, she's also an assassin. Ibuki takes Yoichi to a date beforehand so that they can experience what it's like to be on a date with a girl. Together, they go to a toy shop and check out some plushies. Ayame, Chihaya, and Kagome couldn't just ignore this turn of events, so they were tailing them. Ibuki and Yoichi then go to a bowling alley. She even tries to hold his hand, but suddenly, Yoichi turns around. She trips, and they both end up in a fountain. Finally, the date ends with Yoichi thanking Ibuki and getting her that plushie as a gift. Ibuki is delighted, but since it wasn't a real date, she decides to go and get him a drink. The younger sisters are all still watching when Hinagata Yui decides to show herself in front of Yoichi. It's about their date, but Yoichi politely declines, which leads to a full-scale battle between them. But it ends with Yui running away after getting her clothes ruined. I'm sensing a theme here. As for Ibuki, she gets cornered by a couple of guys who are pestering her for going out with someone like Yoichi. The sisters and Yoichi all hear her scream, but when they get to the scene, Ibuki had already taken care of them both. The next day, Ibuki's chasing Yoichi so that she can beat his ass for looking at those naked female sculptures at their school, but on her way, she bumps into Ryo, who then ends up in the infirmary. The young man couldn't help but be enamored by Ibuki's charm. He starts daydreaming about how he decides to confess his love to her by putting a letter in her shoe locker. Ryo had the balls to act on his daydream, but he accidentally puts it in Yoichi's locker instead. Now Yoichi fails to properly interpret the letter and thinks that Ryo simply wants to learn martial arts at the dojo. Later, Ryo and his buddy go to the dojo. Ibuki greets them and makes Yoichi teach Ryo martial arts. Yoichi doesn't take this lightly and hits Ryo every time his attention wavers. To make things worse for Ryo, Ibuki makes him and Yoichi do 1,000 push-ups in front of the other students. Meanwhile, Chihaya had received money from her manga, and so she and Kagome decide to go buy some food and drink for their dojo's newcomer. When Yoichi and Ryo finally collapse at the 1,000th push-up, the two sisters return with dinner. Finally, there is a wholesome scene where Ibuki feeds Ryo and Ayame feeds Yoichi, since they're both unable to move their arms. And because this is an anime, then comes the long-awaited beach episode! Somehow, they luck out and win a lottery ticket for a trip to an empty beach. Once again, the Sakinomiya clan assigns assassins to kill Yoichi. This time, it's 2 brothers. They release a ferocious bird as the first attack, whose target is the girls, but Yoichi bumps the girls out of harm's way. When they all enter the sea, except Kagome, she decides to go to the nearby forest and falls into a cavern, but one of Ibuki's disciples named Masashi saves her. Everyone on the beach also gets worried and decides to look for them. Masashi and Kagome are currently inside that cavern. They rush towards an exit, but it leads them to a dangerous cliff. Masashi couldn't keep himself from falling. He tried to grab a tree branch, but the grip wasn't strong enough, and so he fell into the sea. The gang had discovered Kagome by this point, and so Yoichi takes a dive to go save Masashi. The two assassin brothers confront Yoichi on their surfboards, but get defeated. After this beach episode, we return to Ryo's confession. He might have failed once, but he's still determined to confess his love. He runs into Ayame at the store while trying to buy a drink. Since they had chosen the same one, it causes a silly argument. Anyway, when the day's training is finally done, Ryo fails to give his love letter once again. Ayame was trying to give Yoichi a towel, but she failed as well. Though after Ryo's letter falls out of his training attire, Ayume just so happens to pick it up. He notices it and tears the letter apart before she could read it, but the heat of the moment causes him to fall onto her. Though at this exact moment, Tsubame had come to deliver ramen at the dojo. She opens the door and sees Ryo above Ayame. The awkward girl couldn't handle the situation very well, so she drops the ramen and chooses to flee. Later, they're eating ramen when Yoichi casually states how Ryo is too mellow, even though the guy himself had single-handedly defeated the strongest high school gang around. Coincidentally, that same gang walks into the dojo and abducts Ayame. They then confront Ryo and reveal that if he doesn't oblige, they'll reveal sketchy photos of Ayame. Ryo lets them beat him up, but then destroys them inside out together with Yoichi. However, Ryo's daydreaming episodes haven't ended yet. He was daydreaming inside the dojo once again when Yoichi hit him. This causes Ryo to act on impulse and just run outside to shout his confession to Ibuki. The one who hears it is Ayame, and she thinks the confession was for her. If it wasn't awkward and embarrassing enough, Ayame and Ryo are then paired together for a sparring match. Then comes the festival. They were going to enjoy the festival in groups. Ryo and his buddy rigged the ballot, which was supposed to decide the groups for the festival. Ryo is together with Ayame, Ibuki, and Yoichi are in the other group, while Chihaya and Kagome are stuck with Ryo's buddy. They all enjoyed the festival, but the Sakinomiya clan was once again planning on killing Yoichi. Interesting events take place at the festival. Yoichi tried his hand at the shooting gallery, but since it was owned by the Sakinomiya clan, winning was impossible. While Ayame didn't stop hurling insults at Ryo, she was still embarrassed because of his confession, so he takes the moment to clear up the misunderstanding. But then, he sees Yoichi and Ibuki walking together. The man makes his move, he leaves Yoichi with Ayame, while he himself joins Ibuki. Unfortunately, the person he thought was Ibuki turns out to be Tsubame, who was simply wearing a mask. So where was Ibuki during this festival? Well, she was trying to win the main prize, which was a free hot springs vacation. Sakon Sakinomiya helps her win the prize, but as it later turns out, the Sakinomiya clan actually tricked her into winning the trip to the hot springs, all because Sakon's brother, Ukyo Sakinomiya, has a crush on Ibuki. Following the festival, they go to the hot springs. Surprisingly, there aren't many other guests aside from them. When they're eating dinner together with the host complains about how it's the fault of the ghosts that they don't get many guests. Hearing this, Yoichi and Ibuki decide to help resolve the situation by exorcising the ghosts. Little did they know they had fallen for the enemy's plan. When they exit the inn to take care of the ghosts, a sleeping gas puts Ayame and the others to sleep. Yoichi and Ibuki are soon at the entrance to the cave where they're going to take care of the ghosts. But suddenly, they both get knocked unconscious. When Yoichi opens his eyes, Ayame happened to be beside him. Oddly enough, she starts seducing him right there and then. Meanwhile, when Ibuki wakes up, she sees the head of the Sakinomiya clan, Ukyo. He wants to make up for their past differences and reignite the friendship between their clans. As you can expect, the Ayame who is seducing Yoichi turns out to be Ukyo's sister, Sakon. They release the sleeping gas on those two as well. Ibuki's out for good, while Yoichi somehow manages to resist the sleeping gas, but he's still unaware of how to get back to the inn. On the other hand, Ukyo and Sakon had already bailed after grabbing Ibuki. A number of fighters are sent to take care of Yoichi, but he beats them all. By this point, Ayame finds Yoichi, he defeats the last one of those fighters, and then they return to the inn. Kagome and Chihaya were still fast asleep, but they woke them before beginning the search for Ibuki. However, resisting that gas might not have been a good idea. Suffice to say, it doesn't take long for them to find and retrieve Ibuki, but that second sleeping gas was lethal. She is now quite clumsy and can't recall Kagome. Or to put it simply, she's now a handful. Both Ukyo and Sakon make their appearance at the dojo. They propose that if Ibuki is handed over to them, they'll be provided the luxury to live first-class celebrity-tier lifestyles. Ryo, on the other hand, comes across the clumsy Ibuki lying face down right in front of the dojo. He gets her some clothes and entertains her, while Ukyo is complicating the situation by forcing Yoichi and Angela to learn swordcraft. With Ryo being the only one with Ibuki, she's abducted once again. Kagome starts crying in her room while hugging her art project and remembering her sweet yet mature sister. This was it. They weren't going to let the Sakunomiya clan have their way again. Ryo's buddy finds Ryo in a not-so-pleasant state, and so he takes him to the hospital, while Yuichi, Ayame, Chihaya, and Kagome begin the operation to retrieve Ibuki once and for all. They appear in front of the gigantic Sakunomiya residence. It's quite literally a castle surrounded by a river. They put together a raft and make their way over to the other side of the river. Ukyo orders his sister Sakon to take care of them. Sakon isn't really supportive of her brother by this point, but she accepts. Sakon confronts Yuichi and the others and tells them to leave. Her brother will marry Ibuki, and that'll be the end of this matter. Of course, they refuse to leave. Sakon makes her maid shoot them. Her bullets were of no concern to Yuichi. Seeing this, Sakon does something unexpected by putting the maids to sleep. She then slaps Yuichi and bails. More guards appear before them, but so is the case with our guys. Suddenly, Ryo, Angela, Tsubame, and Ryo's buddy are also there trying to help by stopping those guards. Yuichi and the sisters follow Sakon until they reach the place where the wedding was about to take place. Ukyo quickly takes Ibuki and uses a secret passage to get away, but Yuichi and the others don't stop the chase. Just like that, they're on the roof. Ukyo is left with no choice but to fight Yuichi. Meanwhile, Ibuki was finally starting to regain her memory, but the moment of uneasiness caused her to fall from the roof. Instantly, both Yuichi and Ukyo try to jump after her, but Ukyo's sister intervenes and stops her brother. Yuichi, Ayame, Chihaya, and Kagome jump after Ibuki. All of them, including Ibuki, end up in the river, all soaked, but free. No one was injured, and they all say all is well when it ends well. Following this event, Yuichi sends a letter to his father about his life at the dojo, and how he wishes to continue staying here. And that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.